Today I'm painting this lovely little bird with rainbow colors. So first I start by wetting my paper. So I'm using a water brush, but I actually do dip this into a water cup. I have a clean water cup and a dirty water cup. So one I clean my brush in and the other I pull clean water from. So I'm just going to wet this little bird all over. So this is called wet on wet painting. I will be dropping the paint, the wet paint, into the wet water that's on my paper. And sometimes if you wet your whole thing before you start, you will have to go in and wet some parts again if they have dried already. And remember, if you are mixing colors, you can always keep a piece of scrap paper nearby to test your colors on before putting them onto your painting. So I forgot to clean my palette. That is what I'm doing right now. I'm cleaning my palette out from my last painting. I'm really bad about that. So I'm getting some orange. It's a little hard to see there. It's a little off camera. Mixing it with a little bit of brown. I didn't want a vibrant orange. I wanted it to be a little muted, so I mixed it with a little bit of that brown to try and get the right color. So adding that onto my little bird. Getting some yellow. And putting that right in there. And since it's wet on wet, it's usually easier to make the colors kind of blend in a natural way. And you can always push them around where you want them if they're not quite doing what you want. But I think that it gives kind of a more natural look and keeps there from being as many harsh lines. So I mixed a little bit of that yellow with some green, and then I'm applying that right up next to the yellow on the head there, as you can see. Just remember, after each color, you want to rinse your brush off in your dirty water cup and then get some clean water. So then I just went in and I got some green without mixing it with the yellow, and I am now just applying that straight green color. And I'm adding a little bit of yellow there and just kind of pulling it around. Trying to get it to blend the way I want, and now adding some more of that orange and brown mixture. This time it's a little lighter. So with watercolors, if you want the color you're putting on to appear lighter, you can add more water. If you want it to appear darker, then just use more paint, basically. Just don't water it down very much. Use a very thick paint. So I had to re-wet the belly a little bit. And I'm going in with my pink. And you can always check your painting in the light to see how much, or to see if your painting is still wet and how wet it still is. So I'm just pulling that pink down. Now I'm adding a little more clean water because my belly is drying a little faster than I wanted it to. Oops, hair in the brush. Happens a lot because I have dogs. And so then I'm adding my blue. And this is my lighter blue color. So I was trying to add thicker paint to the right side, as you can see, and a little more watered down to the left side, so that I did have some differences there. I wanted the right side of the bird to be a little bit darker than the left side. And with these, I am just kind of trying to blend them a little bit in the middle, or to force them to blend a little bit, because these two colors should mix well. And there, I did decide to go ahead and add just a little bit of yellow. And as you can see, it is mixing with that blue and making a lovely color. There I mixed some of the red with some of the pink to get it to be a little more vibrant. A little more of that yellow. Letting my colors mix together and blend. So I'm just getting some clean water on my brush, and I'm just tapping it into the paint here and there to make a little more texture. These are sometimes called blooms. In some situations you might want to avoid them, but in this situation I wanted them to add a little more interest to my painting. You can do this if you like them, or if you don't like the look, you can always just skip it. With feathers or fur, I usually like to add some clean water to the wet paint to force some blooms in there, so I feel like it adds some neat texture. And fur and feathers definitely have a lot of texture. So here I'm doing the feet with a watered down brown. And I had a drip on my paper that I just used a paper towel to kind of pick up. I apologize that you cannot see my palette very well in this one. In my other videos I did try and fix it, but hopefully I can tell you what I'm doing here. So I mixed some of my brown and some of my dark blue until I got like a gray color. And then I'm applying that to the beak. You can always just apply black, or you can mix your black with your blue if you want slightly different color. And as usual, I am making the top of the beak a little lighter. As you can see though, I'm not letting the lighter paint touch the darker paint, because since they are both wet, they will bleed into each other if they touch. So if you're doing this, you may want to just let that bottom part dry before doing the top part. And if you get a little bleeding though, it's not usually a big deal, and it's something you can probably fix. Now I'm just trying to make it flow more organically, the beak that is, into the face. Now I am outlining that eye a little bit in the brown and orange mixture, but with a little more water added to it, and that little corner of the eye. And there I am going in with the darker mixture now, so less water. So watercolor is often about layering. Watercolor dries a little less bright than it looks when you first put it down. So people often will layer up watercolor. That's how you get some of the highlights showing through the darker areas. So I'm just getting the little eyeliner part of the bird done here. So don't worry if your paint does look too light, because you can always go in and add more layers, which is the way watercolor works. So yeah, usually I will add as many layers as I feel I need until I get the desired effect. Sometimes I like to stand back from my painting and just look at it for a second before deciding what I want to work on next. I was just blending out some of that darker color around the beak a little bit more. And now I'm going to darken the bottom of that beak even more. And try and get it to the shade that I want it. I'm darkening the top a little bit, but not as much as the bottom. So I have a little bit more of a watered down color here because I do want the top to look like it's reflecting some light. So wetting now the little wing on the side. Adding in my darker blue. And then on the bottom of it there, adding in my lighter blue color. Going in and just adding some little strokes at the top for some feather effect. So I'm just doing tiny little strokes. And I am doing that in just the green. So I'm going over the lighter green that I'd mixed with yellow with now just a pure green paint and a little bit of a thicker mix of it. And I'm doing that with yellow. So when I first went in, the yellow I was using was a little lighter, and now I'm going over top that with a thick yellow paint. And I'm just doing that all over those yellow parts. Now I'm back to my orange and brown mixture and doing the same thing with that. Adding some texture. As you can see, I'm trying to be a little haphazard with this. You don't want it to look too symmetrical. A little bit of the thicker, less watered down yellow again, and I'm kind of pulling some of that orange and the yellow together and adding some texture. Checking out my little guy. So as you can see, I'm getting some pink now, some very dark pink that is not as watered down, and I'm adding texture onto my pink parts now. And doing the same with the green. And then I'm taking some clean water and I am blurring that green out a little bit because I felt like it had gotten to be a little too much of a line, a harsh line. So I was trying to just blur some of that green out a little bit while still leaving a little bit of texture. And then I'm going in and doing the same with some of my pink, blurring that out so it doesn't look like as much of a harsh line, at least there at the very end. Wetting my wing on the right now. And using, again, my darker blue color for the top of that wing. And my lighter blue color for the bottom. So there I'm adding some very thick, a thick mixture of my darker blue right along that wing line. So I want some separation between that wing and the body. And I also wanted that right side of the bird to be a little darker, so I'm working on doing that. Also trying to blend it into the lighter parts a little bit there. So I let it sit for a few minutes. I still have one wet spot that I just worked on, but the rest of the bird should be dry. So I'm going back into that wing, adding just a little bit, a few little lines for some detail. So I am now wetting the perch that the bird is standing on. Just being careful around the feet. But the feet should be dry at this point. Still don't want to get water on them if you can avoid it. I'm getting some of my brown and a little bit of it's not thick, but it's not extremely watered down. It looks a little lighter dropping it into the into the water on the paper. We'll say maybe a medium mixture of paint and water. There I'm getting a little bit of thicker paint. I want the color to have some variation to it there. So in some places I'm trying to put it a little darker, in some places a little lighter. There I'm getting more of that brown paint, and I'm adding a little bit of the black to it. A little more black to that mixture, but I noticed it was a little darker than I wanted, so I went in and got a little more brown. Being careful around his little toes. Adding some lines. Getting rid of some water drips there. There I am just taking some clean water and I am just putting a little bit of that in like lines on my painting. Going back to that brown and black mixture, and I'm making a little bit more. And this is not very watered down, so this is a thicker mixture of that black and brown that I'm outlining his eye in. And you just kind of have to play with the amounts of each color until you get something that you like. As you can see, a couple of times I put something down on my paper, decided I wasn't happy with it, went in and remixed a little bit and came back to it. Adding a little more black to that mixture that I had done for the edge of the eye there. And remember, all of this around it is dry. So I didn't want any of this line to bleed while I was working with it. I'm checking to see if that looks dry enough. Again, I got another drip. I have drip problems. But it is best to wait for that part around the eye to be dry before you go in to do the eye. And my drip took a little of my paint away from the corner of that eye, but that's something I can fix. So, as usual, I am painting around the shine in the eye, and I am going to let the white of the paper show through to be that shine. I think it really comes to life once you do the eye. So there I am fixing the corner of that eye now. Once I took that drip away, it took some of my paint away. So again, looking at my painting, trying to decide what I need, if anything should be darker, if anything needs any more shadows or highlights or anything. I decided the feet needed a little bit of that black and brown mixture. As you can see, I'm not covering the whole foot, I'm just doing a little line on the feet and then doing the little claws. So some more lines. And a very light, watered down mixture of that black and brown. Now I am going in with some white gouache. You can stop here if you want, but so I put a little in that shine. And I'm also putting some, I always like to put some for just some added highlights. I feel like it makes the painting sparkle a little bit if you add a little white gouache on in certain places. So I'm just doing it lightly, going and adding it in a few places here. And if you do forget to leave your shine, you can always go in with white gouache and put it back in with the white gouache. And then I'm adding a little bit of clean water to that because that turned out a little brighter than I had wanted it to. I'm going in and blending it out a little bit. So I'm just lifting some of that up with a paper towel, which is something you can do if you get too much paint on something. You can go in with a clean paper towel and dab it and lift a little bit of that up. But that is about it for this little bird. Just a few finishing touches and he is done. So I hope you have enjoyed painting this colorful little bird today.